The warm California night air, usually a comforting blanket, became a shroud of terror. For many, it was a time of peace, a quiet end to another sun-drenched day. But for a chilling few, it marked the beginning of an unimaginable nightmare, an invasion of their most sacred space, their homes, by a predatory shadow that would soon grip an entire state in fear. This was the dawn of Richard Ramirez, a name that would forever be etched into the annals of true crime, the infamous Night Stalker. Born Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, his early life was anything but ordinary, a mosaic of neglect and trauma that seemed to foreshadow the darkness to come. He grew up in El Paso, Texas, one of 5 children, in a home devoid of genuine affection. His father was a former police officer prone to violent outbursts, often targeting his family, leaving young Richard exposed to a brutal reality from a tender age. The most significant and perhaps most destructive influence came from his older cousin, Miguel Ramirez, a former Green Beret and Vietnam veteran who regaled young Richard with gruesome tales of torture and murder while showing him explicit photographs of his victims. Miguel even demonstrated how to use a .22 caliber pistol, cementing a fascination with violence that would fester and grow. This early exposure to depravity, coupled with a budding interest in the occult and dark imagery, began to warp his nascent understanding of morality. As he transitioned from childhood to adolescence, the cracks in his psyche became more apparent. Petty crimes marked his youth, small acts of defiance that slowly escalated. He drifted through life, a transient figure, often sleeping in abandoned buildings or cars. Attempts at forming genuine connections were fleeting, often ending in rejection, further isolating him and fueling a simmering resentment. Inside, a battle raged, a faint whisper of a desire for normalcy, a yearning for acceptance, constantly drowned out by the thunderous roar of burgeoning dark impulses, urges that promised a twisted sense of power and control. The first confirmed attacks were chillingly similar, establishing a terrifying pattern. He would stalk homes late at night, often entering through unlocked windows or doors, moving like a phantom. His victims were chosen at random, defying any conventional motive, their only commonality being their vulnerability. Home invasion, robbery, and sexual assault became his signature, delivered with a brutal efficiency that spoke of an utter lack of empathy. He derived a perverse thrill from these acts, a sense of exhilaration that transcended mere material gain. The fear in his victims' eyes was his reward, their screams his twisted symphony. As the body count rose and the attacks continued across Los Angeles and later in San Francisco, the media, desperate for a name to encapsulate the growing horror, coined the moniker that would forever haunt the collective consciousness: the Night Stalker. Panic began to seep into the very fabric of California society. Law enforcement, despite their best efforts, seemed powerless to identify this elusive phantom. The terrifying realization dawned on every citizen: anyone could be a target, any home could be next. There was no rhyme or reason, just random, indiscriminate terror. The sheer randomness was perhaps the most frightening aspect of all. But as the fear mounted, a disturbing detail began to emerge from the crime scenes, a chilling signature that hinted at something far more sinister than mere violence. Pentagrams, satanic symbols, and other occult markings were found, sometimes drawn on walls, sometimes carved into victims. This bizarre ritualistic behavior suggested a deeper, more disturbing motive, hinting at a killer not just driven by impulse, but by a dark, unholy devotion that promised to unleash even greater horrors. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The escalating body count fueled a growing desperation within law enforcement and the trembling public. Each new headline screamed of another home invaded, another life shattered, another family irrevocably scarred. The initial shock had morphed into a pervasive dread, a suffocating blanket that settled over California's nights. Ramirez's methods, though varied in their execution, maintained a chilling consistency that painted a terrifying picture for investigators. He favored late-night entries, often through unlocked windows or doors, sometimes using tools to force entry with unnerving quietness. Once inside, he moved with predatory stealth, surprising his victims in their sleep. His arsenal was diverse, reflecting a perverse adaptability. Firearms, knives, hammers, and even blunt objects found within the homes themselves. He frequently bound his victims, a tactic designed to exert absolute control, and often forced couples to watch each other's torment, amplifying the psychological torture. The taunting of his victims, a cruel extension of his dominance, was a distinct and terrifying signature he left behind, a psychological scar deeper than any physical wound. The psychological impact on survivors was profound, leaving them with indelible trauma, while the wider community lived under a constant shadow of fear, every creaking floorboard or rustling bush a potential harbinger of doom. A massive multi-agency investigation, unprecedented in its scope, was swiftly launched. Detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and later agencies from Northern California pooled their resources, creating a sprawling network dedicated to hunting this elusive phantom. Task forces worked tirelessly, their days blurring into sleepless nights, sifting through mountains of evidence, chasing down every tip, every whisper. Yet, false leads abounded, dead ends piled up, and the immense pressure to catch the killer before he struck again weighed heavily on their shoulders. The toll on these dedicated men and women was immense, their faces etched with exhaustion, haunted by the unspeakable atrocities they witnessed at every crime scene. They were caught in a brutal psychological game, battling a killer who seemed to anticipate their every move, slipping through their fingers like smoke. The public's fear escalated into widespread panic. Gun sales soared as citizens, feeling utterly unprotected, sought to arm themselves. Neighborhood watches sprung up in every community, transforming quiet streets into vigilant fortresses. Doors that had once been left unlocked now boasted multiple deadbolts, and windows were barred. The trust that had once formed the bedrock of suburban life eroded, replaced by suspicion and an overwhelming fear of the unknown. People slept with lights on, radios playing, anything to deter the silent intruder. Parents kept their children close, fearful of allowing them out of sight. The community's desperate attempts to protect themselves created a palpable tension, a collective anxiety that permeated daily life. Every unfamiliar car, every shadow, became a source of terror. There were instances, agonizingly close, where Ramirez narrowly escaped capture, moments that only heightened the tension and deepened the frustration of law enforcement. One night, a potential victim, armed with a hidden gun, managed to scare him off before he could complete his attack, leaving investigators to wonder what might have been. Another time, a vigilant neighbor spotted him fleeing a crime scene and gave chase, only for Ramirez to vanish into the labyrinthine streets of Los Angeles. These near misses fueled the psychological game between the killer and the police, with Ramirez seemingly reveling in his ability to evade their grasp. Moments of hope, sparked by a promising lead or a close call, were quickly dashed by news of yet another brutal attack, plunging the investigation back into despair. Then, amidst the overwhelming despair and the endless cycle of violence, a crucial piece of evidence was finally recovered from a crime scene. It was a partial shoe print, distinct and unusual, left in the soft earth outside a victim's home. This seemingly small detail, meticulously preserved and analyzed, offered the first real, tangible lead in the frustratingly elusive case. But despite this breakthrough, the identity of the perpetrator remained elusive, a terrifying shadow lurking just beyond their grasp, ready to strike again. The hunt for the Night Stalker continued, now with a glimmer of hope, yet the killer's face remained maddeningly unknown. The partial shoe print, a seemingly insignificant detail to the untrained eye, became the fragile thread that began to unravel the Night Stalker's terrifying reign. Detectives, invigorated by this first genuine lead, meticulously traced the rare brand and size, narrowing down the potential pool of suspects. The break, however, came not from the shoe print itself, but from a fingerprint recovered from a stolen car Ramirez had abandoned after a particularly brutal attack. This single, irrefutable piece of evidence, painstakingly processed and entered into the nascent automated fingerprint identification system, finally yielded a match. The name that flashed across the screen, Richard Ramirez, was met with a mixture of shock and disbelief. He was a petty criminal with a rap sheet, but nothing that suggested the monstrosity of the Night Stalker. The revelation ignited a frantic race against time, a statewide manhunt launched with unprecedented urgency to apprehend the killer before he could strike again. News of the fingerprint match exploded across California. Ramirez's face, once a terrifying shadow, was now plastered on every newspaper, every television screen. The public, weary from months of terror, breathed a collective sigh of relief, quickly replaced by a fierce determination to see him brought to justice. On a sweltering August morning in East Los Angeles, destiny intervened. Ramirez, unaware his identity had been revealed, stepped off a bus, his gaunt face and distinctive features instantly recognized by a group of local residents. What followed was a dramatic, visceral scene that etched itself into the annals of criminal history. An enraged mob, fueled by months of fear and the raw emotion of finally confronting their tormentor, chased him through the streets. He tried to carjack a vehicle, but the driver, alerted by the commotion, fought back. Cornered and desperate, Ramirez was eventually subdued by the furious citizens who beat him until police arrived. The immediate sense of relief that washed over the community was palpable, a collective exhale after holding their breath for so long, though it was undeniably mixed with the lingering trauma of the ordeal. The trial of Richard Ramirez became a national spectacle, a chilling tableau of human depravity and resilience. From the moment he entered the courtroom, often with a pentagram drawn on his palm, Ramirez maintained a defiant and unapologetic demeanor, frequently smirking at the cameras and the families of his victims. He seemed to revel in the notoriety, his dark eyes betraying no remorse. Victim testimonies were harrowing, each recounting a personal nightmare that sent shivers through the courtroom. Survivors bravely detailed their harrowing experiences, their voices trembling but resolute, painting a vivid picture of the terror he inflicted. The sheer volume of overwhelming evidence, fingerprints, shoe prints, eyewitness accounts, and the chilling consistency of his modus operandi left no room for doubt. After a grueling process, Richard Ramirez was convicted on 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. The jury recommended the death penalty, a verdict met with a somber sense of justice for the unspeakable acts he had committed. The aftermath of the Night Stalker's reign left deep, indelible scars. The long-term psychological impact on survivors and their families was profound, a wound that time could never fully heal. Many struggled with PTSD, chronic anxiety, and a shattered sense of security. Yet, in their courage to testify and rebuild their lives, they demonstrated an extraordinary resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable terror. For law enforcement, the case became a critical learning experience, shaping future strategies for combating serial crime and emphasizing the vital role of forensic evidence and interagency cooperation. Richard Ramirez, who eventually died on death row from complications of B-cell lymphoma, remains an enduring symbol of pure evil, his name synonymous with the darkest corners of human nature. His infamy, a chilling legacy, serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can exist within humanity, and the collective struggle to confront and overcome such malevolence. The Night Stalker's reign of terror ultimately ended, but the shadows he cast continued to linger, a testament to the lasting scars left by his monstrous acts.